leads nicely into our next question, which is really about how you've defined your own roles and identities beyond traditional roles and stereotypes that might be expected of you because of any of the identities you hold, whether it's a gender identity, whether it's a racial identity, ethnic identity. But do any of you have any stories of how you've kind of taken upon yourself to define your own identities beyond the traditional roles and stereotypes?
So I have a story that I feel like is interesting when it comes to defining your own role, because so to give you some context, in India, we work with, that's where our manufacturing partners are. And now we only work with women-owned or women-led manufacturing partners, which makes me very, very happy. But there was a time period in which that was not the case. And so I would be getting on the phone with these people at 7 a.m. in the morning, and I would be giving them substantial orders, like doing things that would be bringing them money too. And things would not get done. It would take forever. They wouldn't listen to me. They just passed by everything that I said. And at first I was like, oh, is this my organization? Am I not sending them the right stuff? Like, what am I doing here that's wrong? And so what I realized is it was because I was speaking and I was a woman. And so I had my dad get on the phone, say the same exact thing that I just said, and within a week, everything that I wanted completed was done. And so I guess the reason I bring that up is because I had that identity as a woman in their eyes, that they felt like I wasn't a serious business owner. And that was something in their eyes that was set in stone, right? It's something that they probably could not get over. And so I realized there's probably so much pushback I could keep doing that, or I could just have my dad get things done in a second. So I know it's a different way of looking at how you define your roles, but I think in certain situations, especially when you're dealing with culturally entrenched mindsets, in the end, when you get to the goal that you want, sometimes you have to look at other avenues because you are a woman, and that's something that can't change.
Yeah, I was just going to say, wow. And, I'll just share, I think you mentioned, I can push back, or I can just have my dad get things done. And I'd offer a small little nudge and say, you got things done because of your cultural sensitivity, because of your willingness to say, I'm reading my audience. I understand that there are these entrenchments. So, your dad was a mechanism, but you got things done there. And that's just incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and I think that the second part of that is that you now have women entrepreneurs in your portfolio, and so you didn't just stay with, okay, Dad, you're going to be the one who talks to everybody all the time. You kind of got through that. You understood what the limitations were and the challenges, but then you kind of what do they call it? You did a paradigm shift. And you reframed the problem, you reframed the answer, and now you can say, I have all, and someone might say, well, why is that? And then you can tell them that other story and say, look, my dad couldn't do this all the time. So I think that it was the journey that's really kind of cool to hear you say that.
Yes. Yeah, no, it was a fun journey. And thankfully, back to the universe helped me get there in whatever way it had to.
Yeah, that story actually gave me chills. Just the whole thing, like to the end. That's really amazing. Good for you. Love it.
So what about other ways that, Sarah, Christine, that you've kind of defined yourself and your identities beyond what's traditionally been your traditional roles or stereotypes?
So one thing that I found interesting about myself over the time. So when I started off, I was the manager of waste reduction and recycling, a small group on campus. And then I moved into this role where I took leadership over 5 groups or 6 groups, depending on what time in my career. So I went from small to big really quickly. And there had never been a woman in this role at NC State for sure. And so when I first started in that space, people were definitely very quick to say, she can't do this. I mean, to my face, you're not going to tell me what to do, calling me, darling, things like that. Awesome. And so as I progressed and realized that I had found my footing and I really loved this job, and kind of started really finding my space as a leader, one thing I find myself doing is the opposite of people that maybe had the role in the past, or I guess, like, for an example, I always choose not to sit at the head of the table. And maybe you all do that too. I don't know, and people say, no, that you're supposed to sit there. And I was like, no, I'm part of the group. I don't want that seat, because I'm not asking you to defer to me. This is a conversation and I want it to be collaborative. And it took a long time for people to get used to that, because I was choosing not to exert power in these stereotypical ways that are, just part of society. Oh, if you're the leader, you sit at the head of the table, or if you have an event, you have to give this big grand speech. A lot of times my choice would be to go around and have individual conversations with people, versus feeling like I needed to be the loudest voice in the room. And so over time, I mean, I've had people ask me about some of those decisions and wonder why, but, I feel like it sets the tone for who I am. And it says that I don't have to follow this decided way of that business runs, or the way that just these traditional ways that we've set for simple meetings. And so it's kind of interesting, but I honestly feel like my strategy is more to treat people in an equal way, and that they tend to follow my lead more easily than when I'm trying to use power to get to a certain next step, if that makes sense. So it's kind of just defining a different way of leading in a very traditional atmosphere that I work in. If that makes sense.
Yeah, Sarah, that's fabulous. I'm noticing kind of a thread that I'm really enjoying with your responses of, being intentional about the day-to-day interactions, and about, the way in which we do life on a daily basis in our works, and how you can make what some people might see as subtle changes, but they're absolutely meaningful in the way we name people and where you sit and how you interact. And I love that intentional focus on, everyday interaction, and how we can really make a difference by changing some things when we walk right into a meeting. Love that.
So I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. I have talked a lot about, being the first and the only, and how I want to talk about kind of being able to embrace some of those traditional roles. Which is something that we talk about. And I'm going to preface this by saying, this is Christine Grant talking about Christine Grant. I'm not mandating that anybody should do or not do what I've done. So I've been married for 32 years. I have a 26-year-old son. My husband is an engineer, and we have, been extremely supportive of me and my career and all the different things I've done, right? And at the same time, being a mom of a little toddler at that point, I wanted to be able to go to his school and sit around the circle and bake the cookies and have the friends over and make cookies and make little cars and do all kind of creative stuff for the birthdays. And I wanted to do that. And I allowed myself the space to do that. And I had people around me who were, I don't want to call them professional, Sarah, right? But people who had similar degrees to me, who were home with their kids. And I would interact with them, and they would kind of live through me, I think, in my job, and I would live through them because they got to stay with their kids. And then as my son got older and went off to college, at some point, my mother got very ill. She passed away about 6 years ago. And so I had to be a caretaker and have all these caretakers in the house and manage all these different people coming in through her cancer treatment and all that. Thankfully, she was here. She was able to be here in Raleigh with me, and she had been there since my son was young. But I got to be a traditional daughter, just to come and just be a mom, and just sit with her and eat popcorn or make her, so I think that while all of these things that we do and we talk about these traditional roles and stereotypes, I think that we need to give ourselves space to to do some of those things that people might think are stereotypical, right? Not because we have to, but because we want to. And we have a family structure. If you are in a family structure, whatever that structure looks like, that supports that. And I think we need to, because it's not either or, and a lot of the women that were home with their children, they actually, after their children got into school, they actually went back to work into their professions. And so now, they're talking about going back to work. And I'm like, well, gee, how long have I been working? I want to be home now, kind of thing. So I think having the support system for you, whatever you decide to do, a lot of my colleagues didn't see the things that I'm talking about right now. And I didn't think that I could show them the fact that I was taking my son to 2 daycares and he was having lunch in my office. I used to sneak him up the back door, between in the middle of the day and having a nap, and and then I would take him to his second daycare. I didn't feel I could show. So there's a lot of challenge. Is not perfect, but I think giving ourselves an opportunity to, if you choose to, and you are a mom, to do some of those traditional things if you want to. I think that's important.
Yeah, Christine, I love that, and I was in a similar position, being a professional and the mom. And, I noticed actually taking this position as dean, it was the same year that my daughter was moving to college. And one thing that has been really important to me, and that I'm comfortable enough in who I am and what I've done to be able to, say to my team, guess what, I'm moving my daughter up to college, and I'm going to be focused on her for this period of time. Or, guess what, I need to end this meeting early because I got a call from, a family member. And those are things that I wasn't as comfortable in my skin earlier in my career. But I feel very fortunate, and I absolutely acknowledge I'm in a position of privilege now to have the title that I have, but I also feel very fortunate to be able to hopefully model for others that it's okay to do that. And that, if you are on my team and you have something to do with your family, or you need to take a call, or you need to attend to your children or your parents, you do that. And so now, I hope I can be a model for others in speaking that into being and saying it's okay to talk about that in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about this next question, but I'll ask it in a pointed way because I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So how do you show your strength, your power, or command the attention of others, while also continuing to kind of be your authentic self? And maybe there's a built-in, to that question, maybe there's a built-in false dichotomy, right?
I
Anyway.
would say, I'll say this and then maybe I'll give you a better answer later. I would say the ability to do that and to learn to do that for me has come through some very targeted coaching and targeted mentoring by other women in STEM who are not at the university, right? So people who I would look up to and say, how do you do? I've done things where I've interviewed people, where I've taken them off to the side and say, I don't want anything from you. I just need to hear how you do X, how you do Y, and learn that, and then become a part of their kind of orbit where I get to continue to learn from them. So that's all I'll say now. Maybe I'm going to think about this a little bit more, but I had to learn that from other people because it was tricky. There weren't enough role models in my little orbit here to help me to learn how to do that. Now, there were a number of women faculty in the College of Engineering that were doing some things. And then at the same time, I needed something from the outside too.
So I think kind of how we were talking about earlier, it's important to talk about things like therapy and not being ashamed of going to things like therapy. I know we were talking about that in the sense of COVID and telling people I have COVID, I had it. So my best piece of advice to this question came from my therapist. And so it was funny because this is, I think, something really interesting because it's it's a fine line to toe and to figure out. And I don't think anyone really ever has the right answer for this kind of thing. But one of the things my therapist said is like, when I think of any decision, when I think of any situation coming up, I think about the core values that I have as a person, and which decision, which path, which action lives most by those core values. And so almost having words and guidelines in place that you try and live by on an everyday basis when you're coming to figuring out how you should show strength or command the attention of others, and not become someone that you're not. That's kind of how I try and think about that situation. Like, okay, if I did X, Y, and Z, does it fit under this value I have, this value I have, and this value I have? And I try and keep that list of value no more than 5. So it's really easy just to be in my head, like, yes, 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 or no, 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 no. So that's something that I found really, really helpful, in addition to really relying on mentors and others, like was said earlier, to like show me the way and learn from their mistakes too.
Yeah, I think piggybacking off that, just the reflection piece is so important, right? Like you just mentioned, kind of as you move through the world, taking that extra moment to really think about the impacts of something, whether it's a small thing, but it might reflect in a big way on another group of people, or just, yeah, that awareness that our actions are perceived differently by anyone that we come across, right? And so reflecting on, in a leadership role, if I make this decision, how will someone else see that? And making sure I'm communicating effectively about the why behind any decisions, and getting a lot of collaborative feedback on a big decision so that people aren't blindsided, things like that. And that, kind of that, what is your mantra, or what are the things you live by? Just that whole be the change. For me, it's like living every day in that way. How am I going to be the thing that I want to see in the world? And it's got to be, if you don't reflect on yourself, you're not going to get there. But no, I love what you said about just having those core values and keeping them in line, and making sure that the people around you know your core values too, so they can support you. And also when a decision is made that maybe they don't understand, maybe they can reflect on what your core values are, and it helps them to better understand.
Yeah, I think that I love what both of you said. I think that there are core values that came out in this discussion. And for me, one of my core values is my faith. And, when I came to Raleigh, one of the first things I did was to find a church home, because that was like important to me. So I have my church family, I have my pastor, I have the choir I sang in, I have the, all the things that I did. And a lot of, that's another group. There's a lot of those women were at NC State. And so in terms of African-American women in my network, even though there weren't some in the same role as me at the university, I had them across campus. And so finding that network is important. So I think the other thing is that your authentic self, I think your authentic self is the same throughout. I'm doing a lot of cleaning, and I'm finding essays that I wrote in high school when I was going to college. And when I was going to grad school, I'm thinking, whoa, I said that back then. I still actually believe that. But going to what our colleague said about counseling, this is something I love to talk about. I did counseling when I was a graduate student. I've done counseling at several different times in my career as a faculty member and as an administrator even. For me, counseling usually happens at the intersection of change, right? So when I became a new mom, when my mother passed away, when I got married, oh my goodness, just different things. I found that I needed time during that. And I think that finding and identifying your authentic self, how you express it can change over time. As you go through your life, it will change and it will express itself differently. But having a counselor, whether it's somebody that is paid as a counselor through the counseling center or through whatever, we have insurance for this, people, okay? Or somebody who's just a wise counselor or an advisor, because sometimes we can't figure it all out. And as my colleague said, you sometimes you want to present your authentic self, and sometimes you're kind of confused. Okay, is that authentic? Is this me? Like the hair, is that me? Or is that me? Or is that me? Kind of thing. So I think that it's important to have people to be able to advise you that you trust in that space. So if anybody's having any issues, please go to counseling. I didn't say that early in my career, Deanna, right?
Yeah,
When I
yeah.
didn't know what's going on, but now I'm like,
Yeah.
no, it's important. If
Yeah.
you need it, you don't have to have it all the time, all, through your whole life, but certainly if you feel yourself in a place where you really need to do that, then please do it, because it helps.
Yeah, and that is something that's been rolling around in my head as you all been talking. There's one of the things that I've come to in the last couple of years is that I'm in positions where in my job in many ways is to hold the rudder steady, like to really hold steady, either the tone, either the from the day-to-day interactions for the financial health of the college, for the academics, to hold steady. But that doesn't always mean it's easy. And I've come to embrace that sometimes there's a strength in the vulnerability. And especially working through this pandemic, I've sent emails to our college community and said, yeah, I'm scared about this too. I worry about, my family. I worry about getting sick. I can't even imagine what it would mean to have a child in elementary school at this point. And I'm scared, and I can help be at the realm and do the best I can to get you the information you need. And that's something like being able to admit that there's a vulnerability there. Took a very long time for me. And I think it switched for me when I started teaching and training new teachers and really thinking about what does credibility mean? What does it mean to be in an authentic space as a teacher and as a mentor? But it just dawned on me as you were all talking that, being that authentic self is sometimes saying, you know what, I'm not okay today, and I can be strong and powerful in not being okay. And so I'm so glad that message has come out in this community, because I think it's something that people need to hear, that it's okay to not be okay, and you can find help. And I think there's so many pressures sometimes to always be okay and always push forward and kind of be strong and et cetera.
Well, I think I said this before we started recording, but I had COVID. You see me drinking. I still have a sore throat. I'm tested a negative now, and I love to tell people this because there are a lot of people that have had COVID. A lot of people who do not talk about it, who will not talk about it. I think there was some level of COVID shaming going on about a year or two ago. You had COVID. Ooh, what's wrong with you? However, I have my vaccines, my boot. I said it actually in the presence of some faculty, or the presence of my department, or the presence of, and all of a sudden people started sending me personal emails and telling me, Christine, I was afraid to tell anybody, but me and my spouse had it too, or me and my kids had it too. And I was afraid. Thank you for sharing that, because now it's given me the opportunity to say, because it's something we should be able to talk about and not feel badly about. And so anyway, that's another, I'm sharing you got all of me. So.
Well, part of we've been talking about, it's kind of destigmatizing some of the things that we're not supposed to talk about, or that, society says are, off limits.